Hello and welcome to Beyond GDP, the Social Progress Podcast. I'm Michael Green, CEO of the Social Progress Imperative. And in this second season of the Beyond GDP podcast, we're going to be looking at different ways of imagining the success of our societies. Now, we do this with the Social Progress Index by looking at things like life expectancy, educational attainment, quality of life indicators. But my guest, philanthropist and author Kim Samuel, who is steeped in Beyond GDP thinking and measurement, is looking at things in a slightly different way. And we're going to look at her latest work on the idea of belonging, which I have to say really has seemed to have struck a chord with people, Kim. I think because in concern about in this social media age that people are paradoxically becoming more lonely and isolated. So a very kind of timely and topical piece of work that you're working on. So Kim, why don't we kick off? What is belonging all about? What do you mean by belonging?
I want to first thank you very much for having me on your Beyond GDP podcast, Michael. And to begin with, what is belonging? Belonging is something that I see very much as a birthright. By simple virtue of the fact that we are born, we all have an inherent right of belonging, which I realize could sound very wishy-washy, but perhaps not to someone whose birth was never registered or who isn't able to go to school or is in the out group. We can think of many of those today and doesn't have the opportunities that others have. And not to look at it as a new human right, but something that hopefully can lift up a lot of others. In practical terms, it's not a feeling. It's really a measurable outcome where, in the parlance of your show, GDP is an output, SPI, the Social Progress Index, is outcomes, and belonging can explain where progress can stall. And just to finish, I divide it into 4 words. They all begin with P. How convenient. Our connection to people, to place, to purpose, and to power. And I would also add that this is not to say that being lonely is not a big deal. It's a huge deal. But what I'm talking about also relates to the systems that govern us. It relates to who and what gets measured and who and how policy is built across the spectrum.
Why do we have an issue with belonging? New issue that's emerging, a sort of crisis of belonging, or have we always had it? I mean, is it René Descartes' fault for inventing the Cartesian self that we forgot about how we're embedded with other structures? Why is there an issue with belonging? And is it one of this period or a longer term problem?
Both would be my answer to that. But let's start with the longer term problem where we see the human tendency to turn someone else into the other or someone else or another group into something less so that I can be more. That's been around forever. I haven't read about a time in history when everything was perfect. I don't think there is one. I think that we are here doing our best as human beings, slogging it out every day. Is it a crisis now? Yes. Why do I say that? We can look at the linkage of not having a sense of who we are, where we belong, our choices, our agency, our voices. In one sentence, I could probably say it. The geopolitical global landscape today is downright frightening, combined with the ever frightening, ongoing, terrible news regarding climate. Even though there are some bright lights, it's a pretty darn scary time. And for those of us that have children or no children, or in my case, have grandchildren, it's not so much about me. It's about what's the belonging, what are the resources for the generations to come. I pick belonging now. It's the thing that I write about and talk about and I'm passionate about. 25 years ago, for me, it was about social isolation, which I consider very much related to loneliness. But social isolation is something that I believe can happen to a large group of people who may or may not be lonely at that time. Let's think, for example, of forced migrants, asylum seekers. You could say, well, the group they look happy. The families are together. They have no freedom, no idea where they're going, and don't have basic needs. They could be lonely or not lonely. That can happen to anyone, whether they're surrounded by people or not. But belonging to me gets us right into social and economic policy and into how we allocate and decide where resources go. Is it having a moment? You know what I think, Michael? I think the word is having a moment. I do. I think the crisis is really prevalent right now because a lot of us are feeling a little hopeless and a little lost.
Tell us about your journey. How did you social isolation and then the journey into belonging?
Going back to 1997, and don't worry, I'll do these data points quickly. They're relevant to my journey. In 1997, my late father, Ernie Samuel, had a catastrophic and unexplained brain injury. He was in a coma for 3 months, which frankly felt like an eternity for our family. And then he woke up, and he woke up very, very, very slowly. He went to a rehabilitation hospital. Before that happened, we were told as a family that there was not, in our case, a Canadian dollar available for rehabilitation for him unless we could pay for it, because he had reached the age of 65, and that was determined by insurance. We were fortunate to have medical insurance. Many people have none, but they said, no, he's too old, not worthy of this. So I was already then aware of ageism and shocked by it and really attuned then. Well, we're lucky. We were very lucky. First of all, Dad woke up. But we were also really lucky because we could afford to get some rehabilitation, and otherwise we wouldn't have been able to regain any of the functions that he'd lost. So that's one. The second part of it relates to, I guess the first one I would say is rights, justice. And the second one is too, in a different way. It was his actual direct experience as he got better and more aware of what he'd lost. He had many different complicated and interrelated disabilities. It was seeing the way that he was treated by other people, like he was invisible, or even maybe worse than invisible. He was visible, but treated as much less than he was. And we need to move this along, but there were so many examples of this. I got to wake up, I guess. I got an opportunity to wake up as to what happens to people with disabilities, but also people who are poor, or people who are LGBTIQ plus, or anyone that is deemed to be outgroup for any reason. And it's not the disabilities. It was the perceptions and attitude toward people with disabilities. It's not that someone is poor. And as you know, I'm part of a center at Oxford that works on multidimensional poverty, of which income is only one dimension. It's the way they're treated because they're poor, perceived as less than. And that was the beginning of a journey that will probably end with my last breath. The other part was 2003. My father passed in 2000. I was very fortunate to be introduced to Nelson Mandela. And I had a few minutes, which was a golden few minutes to speak with him. I asked him if he had ever been isolated, fully expecting him to speak about Robben Island, not only his 27 years incarcerated, but the 19 that were there, mostly in isolation. He said, no, I've never been isolated. I recovered barely, and said, not even in Robben Island. And he said, no, because in Robben Island, we were all brothers working together with a common purpose. I was never alone. And that was the moment for me, for you, and for whoever is listening to this has probably read something about Nelson Mandela. He wrote about being lonely, but not isolated. And it was that part of it that I wanted to work on, which I will be doing as close to my dying day, which I hope is far away in the future. But that became my mission.
That's great. I mean, amazing stories, Kim. Let's talk about what's then driving this. I mean, is this I would reach to is kind of economics? Is it globalization, free markets, flexibility of labor? Is that a big driver behind all this? Is this an economic phenomenon?
Well, I'm glad that you raised that, because yes, it is. And it's often ignored as an economic phenomenon, siloed, so to speak, where it's almost, I could do this on one shoulder. I'll pick this one, where people, isn't that nice? Oh, that you care about people. Well, as it happens, I do care about people, but that is not necessary, I guess, to be doing the work of measurement, which I think is extremely important. And I don't think that we can be doing any of this work without measuring and quantifying. And I can speak a bit about that as well, how we do it. But this is not a niche social policy area. And it's not simply about caring more, though I think we should care more. It's not an over there thing. It's not simply when an economy is going really well, sure, we can do lots of different things. How about now when we see so many countries in the world diverting budget areas that might well cover something like this, in which I would put social housing, for example, or transportation, and allocating to defense budgets, this becomes the optional bit that is just really nice. And I'm trying to make the point that it's very important. It's economic, it's social, but it's also political. There's various adages about this. I'll use one. What gets measured is what matters, but who decides what matters are usually going to be people in government deciding what matters at that moment. I also want to say, if we don't do this kind of work, we can end up with any number of disasters. And I'll just give you one, because I live in the constituency where the Grenville fire took place. And that was horrible. And that happened because of cheap cladding, the coating that goes on the outside of a building. And the unit cost was actually very different between the good kind and the cheap kind. And a determination would have been made that looking at social housing around the world still is, that given the cheap kind, from everything I've read and talked to people that were there, the community had done everything right. They came together, they reported everything that was wrong, and yet didn't have the political will to get things done. So I don't want to say, if you go to get a bagel, I like bagels. I never order the Epidemic bagel, because in the end, you just know you've got a lot of seeds in your mouth, but you're not sure what you're eating. At the same time, I think that we need to be really pragmatic as to what the inputs are. And at the same time, I feel like a lot of what I'm doing is a big wake-up call to things that we already know. People know belonging feels like. We know the difference of going into a room, or we've invited you, you're very important, and you can sit at the big kids' table, but we don't really want to know what you think, as opposed to going in and working in collaboration and doing really good research and giving tools to people that they can then use to take forward. That's how I want to do it.
Belonging, we sort of know what it feels like, but you also talked about measurement. How
Yes.
are you thinking about actually measuring and giving this empirical life?
Right. Measurement is vital. And I say that as someone whose work is qualitative, not quantitative. So I try to hang out with economists, especially development economists, as much as I can to get to the bottom of it and look at things over time. What we started at the Belonging Forum, now in its third year, is something called the Belonging Barometer. And the Belonging Barometer is something that we do in partnership with an organization called Opinion, who are really doing polling work. And at the constituency level, around every constituency in Great Britain, to ask people in a survey, it was a survey, various questions that were scientifically designed in order to get a sense of people's belonging across different categories. And I hope to take this to other countries as well. So maybe I can give you a few quick data points on those.
Yes, please.
21% of people do not feel like they belong. 34% feel that the UK government represents them very badly in Northern Ireland. 41% of people with a disability report frequent loneliness, compared to 24% of those without. And 16.5% are multidimensionally isolated, where there are gaps across all four Ps. I just picked a few from different areas. I can also tell you that what we found is that the most isolated group that feels the greatest lack of belonging are young people ages 18 18 to 25, and particularly young women, which is not to say that young men aren't struggling too, but it's really startling. And we'll be coming out next month with the third iteration and see a lot of consistencies. We also see that people who rent rather than own their own home will have a lesser sense of belonging. And we see this also with older people. But I want to say that age demographics is just one part of it. And at the same time, your level of income, your socioeconomic standing is not the big thing. It's really much more about identity and how people see themselves, and people also that belong to a faith group, not to say that they have to worship one day of the week, but that feeling of belonging also, it comes out in a greater overall sense.
So being part of a faith group seems to be good for a sense of belonging, which I think economics doesn't really explain it. Again, that feels intuitively right, in the sense you can go to some of the most loneliest neighborhoods where there are big houses all separated from each other, and clearly there's no sense of community there. Let me ask about regional difference. I'm a proud Londoner, and my friends from Scotland tell me that London is not a friendly place, and back home everyone's friendly, or there's more sense of community. Do you find that in your data?
Yes.
Okay.
But in an interesting way is that you can be, I live in London as well. My London is my neighborhood. That's my London. It's where I go, absolutely where I go to get my coffee and say hello and go here and here. And in big cities, it can be that way. I know from direct experience, it was very hard to be new here. It took me a long time to not take a bit of offense when you would be told that you're, in one way or another, you're not people like us. I didn't think that was a good sign at all. But even within constituencies, I've had the opportunity to meet with various members of parliament, not because of political party, but because if they're interested, we love to go and have them bring together people in the community and do a roundtable and get to chat more about this and talk even what would a charter of belonging, the principles that really matter, look like, which we're getting on to. The first year that we did it, people were reported as feeling much more adrift in the city. And then last year, it wasn't so different. We still had that result, but we also had constituencies that cover, as you know, that it's not just this is this part of the city, that some cover in the city, out of the city, that were much, having a much better sense of cohesion. We don't have the answers to everything. That's why we keep doing this work. But what I can tell you is that from my own getting around the UK and talking to people, is that a lot of people that are, let's say, doing all kinds of work, because I think so many people are doing the work of belonging and they don't know it. When they know it, it's like, oh, that's what that is that they don't know each other. Yeah. They don't know each other. We've had a few community roundtables, as we call them, and hope to have many, many more. And someone may run this group. Someone may be running a local business. It's all kind of it's curated in the sense of whoever wants to come can come. And you do that. Well, if they don't have a chance to meet each other and know each other, then you're not going to get the kind of collaboration that you need. And also, when we come back to the economics, you were mentioning about areas that are poorer, probably, and this we have data on, being more likely not to have a decent library or safe green space for kids and everyone to play. And there's been some really interesting research with another of our partners called the Data-Driven Environment Lab at the University of North Carolina. They research social inclusion alongside the effects of climate change. And so you have to set out to research this in order to get there, or we could just assume that there's poorer areas, economically poorer areas, don't have the leadership and vibrancy to come through. They do. But it's a little bit like my dad when he was all of a sudden 65, which he was alive. That was good enough for me, age-wise. Mm-hmm. And people were just walking by, and people, even well-meaning people that had been his colleagues in work and friends, friends, they just kind of faded away, like the mist of Brigadoon. And for my mom as well, she was still his wife of 45 years, and was now designated primary caregiver. So I think it's up to all of the rest of us to say we don't really know what someone else is going through ever, but to almost start with that point and to listen and pay attention to what research people are looking for, and then to be absolutely objective and don't look for what's going to come out of it.
Measurement and empiricism is a welcome theme on this show. I wonder, as a parent of a teenager, obviously the thing that leaps to my mind is technology, social media. You talked about young women feeling the most isolation. Is that part of the story? Is technology causing this problem for us?
I don't. Good luck with the teen years, by the way. I graduated a while ago. I know what it's like in there, especially in these days with a lot of challenges that weren't there when I was in the parenting of a teenager stage. Still don't know how I got through it, but anyway. Yes, it is, but it's not technology. Isn't it? It's how we use it. It's how do we use technology? How do we safeguard as much as possible disastrous outcomes happening over learning? There's a center at Harvard University, Digital Wellness Lab, that we're also doing some work with, looking at the relationship of belonging or lack of belonging to addiction, which probably isn't the right word, but heavy use of social media in the digital world. And we know that there's a lot of different kinds. And I guess if I can share one useful bit on this now, Dr. Michael Rich, who heads that program, and his colleagues have really helped me to learn that you can't ban something just because it may have negative consequences. So maybe what we need to do is to push for the kind of laws that are age appropriate, but also ask the young people themselves. And that research, we're not able to interview adolescents. Those are our teachers in all of this. So it's like saying medicine, right? I wouldn't want us to give up all the amazing advances in medicine, except that sometimes we're at a point now where we could go too far. What are the moral and ethical considerations? So it's not technology. It comes back to us, who's inventing, deciding, and making sure that we're avoiding a case where we end up with single metrics that will miss overlapping vulnerability.
In a moment, I want to ask you for a prediction. No one gets away from the show without making a prediction. But before we get there, just tell people, where can they find more about your work, more about this fascinating data? Where do they go?
Thank you for that. You just look up Belonging Forum and you'll get it. And we're on social media, good use for it. And we can also make the data available if you want to know about your constituency. We'd love to get a big dialogue going about what does a charter of belonging look like, and we've created, after several years, some basic principles. We really want to bring people in to help us with that. But at Belonging Forum should do it, or my name, Kim Samuel, and that's not a prediction. That's a fact.
No, that's good. And then, and we've got obviously viewers and listeners in lots of countries around the world. And so if people are interested and they want to take it to the United States or to Australia, they can get in touch with
please. You. Oh yeah. I mean, there's that term, we usually hear it where everyone brings their ego in and need to be told, check your ego at the door. But here we actually, there can't be any ego in this work, because it can only be done with a lot of us. And I just see myself as a very passionate messenger of a very powerful idea. And the difference between me and others is that this is what I do for all my waking hours and even some of my sleeping hours. But the more people that want to contribute or be part of this, or we can be part of what they're doing, that's really what this is about. It's an open invitation.
That is awesome. And now, Kim, come on, a prediction.
All right, Michael. My prediction is that in 5 years, belonging is going to be a policy reality consideration right across the spectrum everywhere.
Excellent.
Where it's possible. By the way, I should say we need democracy for that. We need a return to more peaceful times. We do. We need people in communities all around the world, not only to know that they have a voice and that they are what matters most, but also to make sure that people that do speak up, which is part of belonging, can do so safely. And then my prediction holds 5 years.
All right. We'll come back to you in 5 years and we'll see how that prediction holds.
I hope it's sooner than that, Time goes fast.
And let's hope it holds. I think there is this decision making can forget the people at the centre of it. I remember this is a long time ago, back in the 1980s in England, and going to some of these sort of communities that were kind of mining communities in the north of England, and they had been categorised as communities to die because they were no longer economically viable. And so these were communities of services and investment because someone else decided they had no future, even though there were people in those. And I think sort of putting the people back into the centre of the equation is absolutely critical, and people as part of communities, that sense of belonging. So, Kim, thank you so much for your work, and thank you so much for being a guest on the Beyond GDP podcast.
Well, it's been an honor. Thank you so much, Michael. Hope to chat again soon.
And thank you, everyone, for listening. Please, as I say, do tell your friends. There's more episodes coming, as well as this excellent one in this current series. So thank you again, and goodbye.
If you want to learn more about going beyond GDP, Social Progress Imperative has the tools to help you. Our flagship Global Social Progress Index covers 170 countries with data going back to 2011. Through 57 different indicators, the Global Social Progress Index gives you a rigorous and comprehensive assessment of how countries are performing on real quality of life, as well as trends over time. Get in touch through our website if you want to know more. They say that what gets measured gets done. So let's measure better and build a better world.